Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. We're happy to have you here. We're going to be starting today a series of conversations regarding the book by Ruth Okezi, A Tale for the Time Being. It is the BI Reads, the Community Reads book, and we have a couple copies still floating around here at the Senior Center. If you have not been able to find one, you can also get them at Eagle Harbor Books on a discount and at the library, but I don't know. I know that they've been handing out a lot of them as well. So but anyway, we're going to be talking over the next couple months about this book, and we're glad that you're here to get the conversation started. And we will be doing this conversation, well, as we work through the book. Today, we're just going to talk about the first part. I want to start by acknowledging that we are meeting on the ancestral homeland of the Puget Sound Coast Salish people, the Suquamish people, in our neighbors to the north, and who spent many, many years fishing and camping and living on Bainbridge Island as well. We are grateful for their stewardship. We're learning from them and continue to learn about how we can be better stewards of the lands and waters. Also, I want to thank Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island, which is a sponsor of Something to Talk About. They have memory care and independent living and assisted living all up on Rolling Bay. They offer day stay and respite care programs. And you can find out more by going to their website, fieldstonecommunities.com, or by giving them a call, 206-594-1010. Ask for Celia or Jamie. And I want to thank Anne Lovejoy, who has been helping us with organizing this from the senior center point of view. I know that there are other activities going on in the community, but we're grateful to be part of that effort. So thanks, Anne.
You're welcome, Reed. And actually, it's pretty great that the Bainbridge Island Community Center is actually one of the sponsors of this BI Reads, and I'm the representative to the city for helping to choose the book. And it was really interesting to me that this selection committee really wanted a fiction book. And so that's what they chose. But this fiction book is pretty thick with stuff that's not really fiction. So I guess you could call it historical fiction, which I think is kind of interesting. There are, by the way, I don't believe that the library has any more physical copies, but they do have audiobooks, and I think there's Libby copies as well that you can get. And also, if you've taken a book and read it already, or you decide you're not going to finish it or whatever, you can recycle it through us by bringing it back to the senior center, and we'll put it in the library and make sure somebody gets their hands on it. Also, I just kind of would love to say that we want this to be kind of a very open conversational book group, and something where everybody can pitch right in with your comments and your ideas. However, I think it's good to remember a couple things. So here's a little housekeeping. Some of the ideas and topics may feel uncomfortable for some of us. So to make sure we're offering a safe space where everybody's opinions can be voiced, let's try a few specific little tasks like listen to learn. We ask that readers approach each session with curiosity and willingness to explore new or unfamiliar ideas. If somebody really violently disagrees, it's maybe let's ask them why and ask them to explain a little more fully. Share the air means let's keep comments to 1 or 2 minutes to make sure everybody gets a chance to participate. But the more voices, the richer the conversation. Also, we found that allowing some silence, so letting a few quiet moments follow somebody's comment, gives people time to develop their ideas and finish their thoughts without feeling rushed. Um, so with all that said, let's just jump right in. In our first session on this series, we're going to look at part one, which offers a whole lot of intriguing themes. Kind of reminded me in a way of our investigation of this Braiding Sweetgrass book, in that almost every page has at least 3 or 4 thoughts that you could spend an hour talking about. Um, So that said, a number of people have found that this book was a little difficult to get into, while others were just been drawn in immediately. And I'm curious, like, what's been your experience with this book? How has you have you connected with it or not?
Well, I can say that um, I read this quite a long time ago when it first came out, I believe, and haven't had an opportunity to get another copy, so I haven't reread it. But I remember it, and I remember not wanting to put it down. And I read it consistently, right from the beginning through to the end without much breathtaking. It was really, I thought it was quite amazing, and I love because I love the the two of them, the one growing into the other, and so on and so forth. So it'll be. I'm looking forward to the conference here.
Oh, thanks, Sheila.
Yeah, I thought that one of the things that slowed me down a little bit on purpose was the character Ruth. I assume that's different than the writer Ruth. Um, at one point, telling herself to slow down and try to read the journal from now um, at the same pace that it might have been written.
Yeah, at the same time acknowledging that you can never really understand the way life is lived, right? But yeah, that's, I mean, the whole theme of time, like how time passes, how we spend time, do we kill time? Can we really fritter time? Like, what is, there's that that pops up in some way or another on almost every section, I would say. Um,
Maybe I've forgotten now, but it seems to me that the author had been talking with her husband about what this sort of what the book was going to be about, and I think he told her to go ahead and make it as autobiographical as she could. Apparently, it is autobiographical to a certain extent.
well, it is, Sheila, because I mean, in fact, the author Ruth is married to a man named Oliver, who happens to be an environmental botanist, biologist, um, and has actually got ecological planting programs exactly as described here. Um, they did find the jungle crow. I don't think they found the lunchbox, but a lot of the background details, she was caring for her mom during her last years with Alzheimer's, and started to wonder if she was getting it herself, um, which I can relate to that too. I mean, I think she did use as much autobiographical detail as was consistent with telling her story. Does that put you off or does that draw you in? What do you think, people? Barbara, do you have any thoughts about that?
That it reflects her real life to some extent.
Yeah.
I like knowing that it reflects her real life. And I like the way her real life husband appears in the book and offers some really significant conversations about plastic pollution in the oceans and how climate change is affecting vegetation and all of that. So what an interesting life they must have.
Yeah. And when this was written, I think it was published in 2013. So it was probably written in over a couple of years previous to that. Those things were not widely, a lot of people were not particularly aware of plastic pollution as we are very acutely now, right? A lot of recent research is telling us every day that there's plastic being ground up into the ocean. But this is, 10, 12 years ago, that was known better probably to environmental scientists than to the average person. So, yeah, but those themes are definitely like environmental connection, I guess I'd say, kind of weaves through this book too in a lot of ways. Even the people walking the beach every day and looking for what washes up and wondering where it came from. And by the way, if you thought that part about the severed foot was weird or strange, actually, it's true. There have been, I think, about 18 or 20 severed feet washed up on that particular stretch of the coast. So all these weird little details that pop in probably are right from their daily life.
I also like the fact, I don't know if I can express this very clearly, of the young character writing to an older character and sort of making you feel the same kind of connection with the writer and the reader, and how you don't know who's going to receive it or how they're going to receive it or when they're going to receive it or if they're going to receive it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and watching as the Ruth character gets more drawn into the story and starts worrying about now, even though, that happened in 2011 probably, right? So it's been floating around for some time. Um, and but yeah, reading it is so immediate for Ruth that she becomes drawn into it and thinks of it as happening now.
Is this how we say we'd like to speak? Okay, I found it really interesting that if you got sidetracked into some of the appendixes, like I didn't go there for all of them, but I went there for the Buddhism and the definition of a moment was fascinating. And I went there for the cat Schrödinger and the experiment with the cat and the atom. But I think as many as, and I'm sure if you reread it, you could visit more of those, and they added a lot.
Yeah, I would say in terms of this being a fiction book, again, there's a lot of fact woven deeply into the fiction, and it's all worth investigating. And of course, Ruth Okezi is actually a Buddhist. She's a monk and she teaches. So it's like
Oh, that's
all that comes out of her direct experience as well.
That's amazing. Is
Is
the
the
grandma? Oh, excuse me. I just wondered if the grandma character is based on a true figure.
Not that I've discovered. I think though that she's probably an archetype in a way. And personally, one of the things I've loved the most about this book is how Jiko at 104 or however she decides she is texting with now, right? So they can communicate immediately in time.
There's a line in here I really liked, which resonated with me. She talks about old Jiko and Marcel Proust come from a pre-wired world, which is a time that's totally lost these days. And I thought, well, I come from a pre-wired world.
Yeah.
That's not lost yet, but it is a line of demarcation that's more significant than I think of.
John, what do you think about that?
Well, I noticed that passage on page 26 as something worth talking about. And it is Now who makes that observation, that she is in, and it certainly relates to my experience as not as old Jiko, but there were so many fascinating aspects to the book, and I'm rereading it, or I have reread it, having read it as Sheila mentioned when it first came out. I'm not sure the appendices were in the hardback edition of the book when it was first published. And I did look at those appendices, which become relevant, especially as the whole story develops toward the end. And so many pieces have to be fitted together over the course of the whole story. It's really worth, if you find it hard to get into it, you'll develop more curiosity about where this is going and how things will be resolved. There is so much of history that gets encapsulated in the story or referred to in the story, and still so many abiding mysteries. We still don't know whether Now has survived the survival of her diary. So it's, well, where do we go? I wanted to comment with reference to the voices in the book. It was interesting to me that Ruth's voice is captured in dialogue, but it's a third person narration that she's created. And then she has created this character so unlike herself in such a different context, a teenager in a rather hostile environment, up against her own internal difficulties. But that teenager says early in the first segment, it's important to have clearly defined goals in life. And she has this goal of committing suicide, but you don't actually find that goal being realized in the course of the book. It remains kind of an escape hatch that she hasn't taken.
But there's other people like her dad and the neighbor boy,
Yeah.
who, who talk
Yeah.
about, how in Japanese culture, suicide is viewed very differently to how we look at it. And, that theme too is really interesting, isn't it? Like
Yes.
Americans think
yes.
that being alive, hopefully till we're 105, is the most important thing. And I think it feels like in Japanese culture, there's worse things than dying. There's a lot worse things than dying.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Well, in that section where her father writes to a professor at Stanford about suicide.
Mhm.
And I really, nowadays in Japan, because of economic recession and downsizing, suicide is very popular, especially for middle-aged salarymen like myself. They get downsized from their company and cannot support your family.
Mhm.
And it made me think about not just the Japanese culture, what I've gleaned from this book, but also the suicide rate in this culture. And just what a hard world we're living in.
And this culture doesn't regard it as a particularly soulful or thoughtful or honorable exit strategy.
Mhm. Mhm. It's kind of related to the suicide we're talking about. One of the things that I almost didn't notice, but going back, I've dwelt upon it. When Nao refers to herself as a Ronin, and I realized that that's a phrase, that's a term that has been transferred into a lot of different modern contexts, from the old medieval world of the masterless samurai. That was the Ronin, but the term is applied to high school students who have graduated, but they haven't entered the next stage of education. They're Ronin, they're wandering, they don't have a vocation yet. And it's also applied to the salaryman who is maybe adrift in or has lost his position. So and it's related to the wave theory. The character Ronin is wave person, wave man, and that relates to so much that is unstable and impermanent and related to the ocean, you might say, the ocean that this book is carried on. There are so many symbolic characteristics in the book that I found fascinating.
Well, and of course, all through this, there's at least the implication that this, not that the journal was washed away in the tsunami after Fukushima, or
Yes,
the
yes,
tsunami that
yes.
caused the Fukushima meltdown event. So there's this whole e- echoes of the wave, the Fukushima giant wave,
Yes,
right,
yeah.
washing away big chunks of society, and nobody
Right.
knows, right?
Yeah.
And of course, for us on Bainbridge, with tsunami signs appearing all around our lower streets,
Right.
it's a little closer to home, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like nothing was done without an intention, like the you're just talking about, and the discussion about Now's name, and when she was learning English, how confusing that was
Yes.
to have that be her name, and now and then. But I think it's just jam-packed full of allusions to different things.
Yeah.
I can think about a lot.
And by the way, John, I do have an original hardback edition that,
Yeah.
um,
Oh, okay.
and the appendices are in there.
Oh, they are. I
Yeah.
I didn't, yeah.
Yeah, this book, I've read it a number of times because it's one of those ones I start thinking about and go back to. And
Yes.
the first time you maybe read for the story, what happened? And
Yes.
then you start going back thinking about all of these. It's like origami to me. It's like,
Yeah.
That's great.
little,
Yeah.
right? And you follow any piece of it, and it turns into this incredible, thoughtful discussion, right? I think we're not used to. It's not a beach read. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
Sheila said, I think it does have, and you hinted at, a narrative drive. I mean, there is a mystery or trying to uncover what's going on, which does make it engaging as a first read, which is where I am. I'm just at the end of the first section.
Me too.
Reed, did you find it easy to get into, or?
Yeah, I did, but I kind of like weird stories and that kind of thing. I mean, I was not put off by the fact that you can't really keep track of. It takes a little while to figure out which side of the ocean you're on and what the experiences are. Because Now is writing in a journal, she's revealing things when it makes sense to in the conversation, not in service of the reader. You have to be patient and let these things show up when they make sense in the book, rather than rather than when they make sense for you. But that was okay for me. I was a little put off by the dark fantasies of rape and murder at the beginning of the book. I thought, oh, where is this going to go? And then I thought, well, if you're a preteen girl, and I know about, certainly who's grown up in America, those are thoughts that are going to flit through your mind. So it's an honest sort of representation of what it would be like to be a girl that age, I think.
Yeah, and that piece for a lot of people is a stumbling block because it's too difficult or too ugly or not real. And it's like, well, now I think it
And
probably is real.
also, I feel like it seems almost gratuitous or something. It's like, why are we exploring what these sort of those waitresses in the fake coffee shop / French whorehouse thing. What? I mean, why is she there? What is this about? But then you look at American and maybe Japanese culture, and it's like it's everywhere. I mean, it would be unfair to kind of ignore it.
Well, anime, Barbara.
Well, I didn't know if she was making these cafes up or not, so I had to go online and search, and they're there, and anime cafes, and I just thought, how strange that is. And then later in the book, she talks about her mother going to get a job as an office lady, and that it was a miracle that she, at the age of 39, could secure a job as an office lady. So it really made me think about, what is the work life like for women in Japan? Oh my gosh. I mean, I've heard a little bit about it, but I thought those two images as sort of, boundaries of some of it. It was awful.
I think work life for men too, because that part where she talks about the forest around Mount Fuji becoming the hanging forest, and that's also true. That's true, which is awful. but it's like the pressures of that culture. But do you think they weren't there in Sunnyvale, California? Because they were probably different, but they were sure there, weren't they?
Well, there was at least the illusion of freedom in Sunnyvale when they had money and could go places and all that kind of stuff, you know. But I'm sure the pressure was still on him
And her probably too, right?
and her. And it was interesting that she considers herself more American than Japanese, but that's where she grew up during her really formative years. So,
Well, of course, her classmates, at least in this section, keep reminding her that she's not Japanese.
Yeah, yeah.
I was just thinking when you were talking about the violent references in the beginning, the violence of the classmates really just was gut wrenching for me, to have everybody ignore you, to go to school, and it would just be torture. Yeah. And I don't know if that's a real, I didn't know if that's
Yes, it
really
is.
something that goes on, is a real,
Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
it
Yeah.
is, that's amazing.
well, and
Yeah.
that the substitute teacher even got
Yeah.
involved in it. You know, he was surfing that wave of hatred and bullying just to become more liked. And there's some point in here where she said, I hope you can understand that I don't think he was a bad man. I just think that he was very insecure and could convince himself of anything the way insecure people can. And I thought, what an incredibly compassionate way to look at such hurtful behavior.
Yes, there's more than a little Buddhism in that
Right.
position.
Yeah.
What about Karen or Joanna or Nita or Martha, Billy? Anyone
Any
else?
of the rest of you who are on the call, would you like to pop in and add anything here?
Okay, no pressure.
No,
Martha,
Yes, I just started the book, and I found it fascinating. It's but it was shocking at the very beginning, and I'm on page 30, but I like, every page is a surprise. It's just amazing, the creativity in the writer, from the writer, and actual facts. So that's where I am, and I just wanted to share it with you.
Mhm.
I'm just happy to read it, and I'm grateful I got the book.
Oh, thank you, Martha. Yeah, and as we go along, you'll be able to hear other people's thoughts about the other sections too. But I take your time, because to me, this is not a book to rush through.
Yeah.
It's really so layered, and that's kind of Oseki's trademark, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
Her Buddhist background and her education. She's a teacher and not one of the, I can't remember which college in New York, but her her development as a human being really is definitely informs a lot of her books, and she does tend to take real shocking facts and weave them into her juicy, amazing stories. And it does keep you kind of checking out, like, is that real? Is that real? And you
Yeah.
keep looking and finding, yes, 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 it is.
Smith College,
Smith, thank you.
and I had read before the book of Form and Emptiness,
Oh,
another Zen inspired book.
One of my favorites of her books is actually sort of horrifying, and will make you vegetarian for life, and it's called My Year of Meats.
yes.
It is her Have you read that, John?
I haven't read it. No, I'm the newer book that Reed just mentioned, I'm interested in that, but I haven't picked it up yet. Yeah.
Well, the library has them all, and she's one of those writers that you start to get hooked in and you start wanting to read everything she
Yeah,
writes because they're
yeah.
so good.
Yeah, that's right.
And yeah, and there's a lot of, it's kind of creepy, and a lot of that book takes place in a library.
Uh-huh.
Where the Year of Meats is about a young Japanese American woman who works for the film industry, as in fact Ruth Okezi has done, and
Mhm.
is hired by the Japanese Beef Board to tour America and collect recipes and do stories, and discovers not only how to cook roast beef with Coca-Cola basting, but also like all the pesticides and
Oh,
things that are in the children developing breasts at age 8 and exposure to uh, hormones, all this stuff that underlies our meat industry. And it's like, that's her style though, to open your eyes in a sort of gentle, humorous, but very blunt way. And
yeah.
Yeah, there is a attitude, at least I'm picking up at this point from now, for despite her youth, and she seems to definitely be she has a voice and kind of a concern that seems right on for her fictional age. But she's very wise and like you said, sort of Buddhist, non-attached. She just explains what's going on without being personally shocked by it. And we talked about her compassion for the substitute teacher.
Hmm.
does some of that come about because of Jiko? Because she's writing this, she hasn't met Jiko yet in the narrative, but she really has. She's telling her story going back, in time, right? And bringing you up to her present, which does include Jiko. So I kind of have always felt like some of that Buddhist perspective comes from her great grandmother.
Yes.
But then there's Jiko's admiration for all these feminist anarchists, I mean, there's more than one that is mentioned in here, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's the hidden family history again. Like, who knows what your great grandmother was interested in? Who here could tell us any, who your great grandmother's favorite writers were and why she admired them? I think that's unusual.
And I think that's historical. I think there were these radical women in that
yeah.
early, in the generation before between the wars, I think, between First and Second World Wars. I don't have that very clear in mind, but yeah, there's a history before the Japanese radicals of today or of yesterday. Yoko Ono has a predecessors.
So does this book, just in this first section, has it already made you start thinking about time in a little bit different way?
For me, it's hard it's a matter of a kind of wandering awareness, because time is so present and it's also so mixed up. You don't know the time frame exactly in which now is writing. You don't know the now of her diary. And Ruth is inhabiting a day by day life that you really get a sense over the course of the whole novel of the texture of daily life and the number of very interesting people around her. So that's an ordinary time, but there are so many different historical time frames, and there's also, I think, I don't know enough of Buddhism to get into the mystery, but it certainly is hovering over the time being, the sense in which time and being are moment by moment and somehow eternal at the same time. I don't really get that yet.
Well, just wait because it gets into quantum physics and then you really won't get it if you're me.
Yeah. There is an appendix for the quantum perspective, which is interesting. Yeah.
Right? But I love
So-
that thought that each day has whatever that was, 90,863 billion moments in which you
Yeah,
can
yeah, yeah, that's right.
change points. All of them are change points. And I think, oh, I think few of us really think about that actively in our, as you're walking along, this could be a change point. I could change my whole life right now. Boom.
Yeah.
Well, and the other side of that of changing in a moment is the part where it says a pine tree is time and bamboo is time, mountains are time, oceans are time. So that's like the vast expanse and depth of time as opposed to
Yes, yeah.
one instant
yeah,
after
yeah.
the other.
Yeah, right.
And then, of course, as an aging person, how much time do I have left? And am I using it the way I really want to?
Yes.
I wrote down
Yeah. How do we really want to? Sorry.
Yeah, I just wrote down a quote from Appendix A, and it was Chico. You can't understand what it means to be alive on the earth until you understand the time being. And in order to understand the time being, you have to understand what a moment is. And then you have to think about that one day is 6,400,099,980 moments.
Yes.
It's kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah. And how do you spend them and not fritter them away?
Yeah.
Not
And
that
yet-
frittering isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? I mean, it's
Right. Right.
it's also, judging what's useful, what's valuable, what just happens.
Well, and some of that's got to change over time. I mean, as someone who's been extremely driven for most of my life, big surprise to you all,
Yeah.
exploring what it's like to back down and back off a little and let stuff happen can feel incredibly challenging. This great emptiness of like, why aren't I doing something in this time? Right?
Yeah.
Isn't this a time to re-examine what is important to us and what we want to do? Anita, are you going to jump in a little?
Yes, well, interesting because you're all talking about being fans of this book, and I'm new to the author, and this book is my first reading. So I started having a very difficult time getting into it and talking about time. Is this worth my time? Do I really need to pursue this book?
Yeah.
But I drawn, and thank you all for your commentary, because I was hoping if I listened in today, I would hear interesting things that make me want to continue reading. I got through the first section to page 108, but when I got to about the middle and the mention of the crows, that made me think, oh yeah, I think I really would like to continue reading, because the husband's comments about the crow, and I've kind of been fascinated by crows since I moved out to the Northwest, and the love of crows that we didn't have in Wisconsin as farmers. That is very interesting. And also I have just about finished a book by Mitzi Loftus. She was a speaker at the bookstore, and she's 94-year-old author. So when I was reading about the bullying, that now undertook, it's not, I mean, I know like when my daughter was in middle school, she was bullied, and we had to deal with it. And not to the extent of now, but Mitzi Loftus had been at an internment camp and then came back to Oregon and was treated. The internment camp was nowhere near as what she had to deal with coming back to this community where she was not where she'd come from, but was not welcomed back, was again just ignored, like now, like she just walking down the street. Nobody saw her, or and treated her mean with, mean intentions. And so it's not just that culture, it's also can flare up in our culture. So I found that interesting.
I'm glad you mentioned
notice that
that.
it even came up between the crows and the ravens, how the crows were bullying the raven that had come, the forest crow that had come over on the gyre with maybe with the lunchbox, who knows?
Mhm.
That, it's like, it's not just human. Something different can really create the feelings of suspicion and create a bullying environment, even in the animal world, right?
Mhm.
Sorry, Don?
The crow doesn't develop as a character with an actual voice in the novel, but the crow is a recurrent figure and a very, very a key figure in what happens at certain points. So you'll see more of this crow, and it remains mysterious, but it doesn't, it's somehow come from Japan. And you mentioned the reading at Eagle Harbor Books. I was there as well. I remember that story, and the way that this remarkable woman dealt with that and worked through it and really got beyond it over time. That was really something.
Well, and it happened here on Bainbridge, even where, we're famously proud of being the community where the most people came back, over
Yes.
50%. Whereas at Tacoma, it was like 11%, and people were told not to come back. You're not welcome. Whereas here, there was more of a welcome. And yet, even so, a number of people have told me stories about being horribly bullied in school or in stores or
Yeah.
not being served
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
here. So, yeah.
Mhm. Right.
Anita, I hope you will keep reading, because I do think as you get in deeper, you'll find a lot to like.
Yeah, sure.
It's not an easy read. It's not a comfy story at all. But I feel like it's a very courageous story in a lot of ways. And yeah,
Anita, could you tell me the author's name again? That you just made reference to?
Oh, Mitzi Loftus.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think they have her books at Eagle Harbor Books still.
They do. That's probably, that's where I bought her book.
Yes. Yeah. Ask about it there. Yeah.
But there are a number of parallel stories here. I mean, maybe that's why this book seemed really appropriate for Bainbridge Island, because we have the island connection, we have the Asian connection.
Right.
Japanese Americans are here. We've heard some of these stories. We have the internment memorial. And I think all these things are kind of connected to, it's like that web of connection again, right? Like we can see this, that would be connecting to us.
One more thing I wanted to say about Mitzi Loftus is that she too dealt with so much of this because her father was a Zen Buddhist, and he didn't expect her to be a Buddhist, but he always set such an example of how he just, was able to deal with all the treatment that they received. And so much, so it, again, kind of ties into A Tale for the Time Being.
Yes. Yes.
So that's all very interesting.
Well, I noticed several times now talks about her grandmother waiting for everybody else to get on the elevator before she gets on it, like wanting to make sure that everybody is safe and secure. She references that a couple times. And she'd also said, she knew her dad wasn't like a safe harbor for her, but then she realized her mother wasn't either. And so I think her grandmother maybe represented that sort of security and sense that somebody is out there caring for everyone.
Yeah, and remember, Jiko likes now to tell her stories from the newspaper about awful things that happen, so she can pray for comfort and peace for those people, right?
Yeah.
I have not read Proust's book, but has anyone here? And are there parallels? It's kind of interesting. She's writing inside his novel now is. Yes, John.
Well, I've read a lot of Proust, and I don't think there are parallels. There are reference points. Proust is quoted, I think, at the beginning of part two, actually, there's a quote from the last segment, Time Regained, the last segment of the whole long novel. It's just one of so many pieces of a frame, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I read it in high school or college, but let's be clear, that was 60 years ago or something.
And it was many, many, many pages, right? It's like several volumes, 3 volumes, I think.
Yeah. And it
Oh, yeah.
wasn't that wasn't a beach read either, I tell you what.
No.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, would you say that name again? The author's name again?
Marcel Proust.
Oh, it's Marcel Proust. Never mind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're talking about the fact that
I'm sorry.
she's writing in the rebound or whatever interleaved book of Proust. So she's kind of, writing in the shadow of Proust or something.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Obviously, there's some sort of echo there. I don't know what. And that's
Thank you.
Yeah.
and I'm sure I will not have read Remembrance of Things Past by the time that we get together again.
I just thought it was as much for the title as anything else, really. The title's so evocative, right? Remembrance of Things Past is what she's doing, right?
But it's
A search
how it was
for lost
formerly
time.
known. And now they've changed the title.
In
more
Search of
accurately-
Lost Time.
A search for lost time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't even know, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I thought, wait a minute, I thought it had a different title, and it did, and I don't know when they changed it.
Well, I think the classic translation used a phrase from Shakespeare. When I summon up remembrance of things past and so on and so forth, but it isn't accurate as a translation of Proust's title.
No, Tom Perdu is Time Lost.
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
I also like the reference, like, more than once, I think, to Canadian culture and how her dad wanted her to go to Canada because there were no guns and there was health care. And it was safe, not like America. And there's in that paragraph, I think she says something like, America is like fast and sexy and exciting, but you could get burned. But in Canada, you'll be safe. And if you get sick, you can see a doctor.
Yeah, and how her husband had that mysterious illness that nobody could fix except running in the forest. It's the only thing that made him get well.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, maybe that's not forced bathing. It's more like forced showering or something.
I don't know.
You're not strolling, you're just racing. But for him, that was a cleansing, healing experience. Whereas for Ruth, when she thinks about nature and she talks about feeling claustrophobic and that all the roses and bamboo that have grown up around the house make her feel like it's a malevolent prison, right? You think, whoa, interesting. Of course, she's from New York City, right? And finds that isolation is difficult for her. I liked when they said that Oliver fries his fish in a different pan.
Yeah.
I'm like, I think we're talking about neurodiversity here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But in a lot of ways, if you look at Buddhism as neurodiversity, it's like a learned or adopted neurodiversity. Thinking, like training yourself to be calm, training yourself to have this completely different way of being in time. I'm sure it's not an accident that those things are juxtaposed.
I also like, this is still in the letter that Now's father wrote to that professor at Stanford when he was talking about suicide, but he also says, sometimes I think American people cannot ever understand why a Japanese would like to make a suicide. American people have a strong sense of their own importance. They believe in individual self, and also they have their God to tell them suicide is wrong. This is so simple, he says with an exclamation mark. And then later on, now I think I must try to stay alive, but I have no confidence to do so. Please teach me a simple American way to love my life so I do not have to think of suicide ever again. Isn't that interesting?
It is interesting. Yes, yes,
And of course, we don't get to know what the answer was.
right.
No, and I also have to wonder how American life looked at the time this was written compared to the way it looks now.
Hmm.
Because it doesn't feel simple.
Oh, Barbara, I don't think it was simple either. You know, that's the thing that we all want a simple answer. Who doesn't want a simple answer?
Mm-hmm.
But there aren't any. If you know, look at the tangles and threads of all our crazy lives woven together. Nothing feels simple to me. And yet Buddhism sort of offers that promise of simplicity, complexity and simplicity.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me think of Jiko saying, yeah, up is up and down is down, except when you're up, down is up. And you're like, wait a minute, what? But that sort of sitting there saying what it is in a much more Buddhist sort of way. And I think for us, that's a very difficult place to get to. True acceptance of what is very difficult because we want to make it the way we want it now.
And so, I mean, there are some simple, or there used to be, not, not accurate, but representations of suicide as cowardly or selfish, or as you were just reading, God says no, so there you're done. It's like at least if not simple or easy American solutions, they are at least not nuanced.
Right.
They're
Well, and in England and much of Europe and parts of America, especially with Catholicism, people who killed themselves were not allowed to be buried in holy ground.
Right, right.
So that was like a ostracism even after death. What?
Yeah, yeah.
I think
Well-
the theme of mental and emotional health or imbalance is another one that weaves all through this in a way that I think many of us can
Right,
relate to,
right.
right? I don't remember that it was called out as a public health crisis as early as 2012 or 2013, but it
Mhm.
certainly is looked
Yeah.
at one now, right?
Well, the story of Now's father and why he lost his job or how he lost his job in Sunnyvale, that becomes revealed very gradually, and it's a fascinating part of the story as so many different things come out in the later sections. And Dr. Leistikow, the Stanford psychologist,
Mhm.
figures in the story eventually again.
Mhm.
So,
No spoilers, John. You got to let
Stay tuned.
we're only in part one, but there's so much to look forward to.
Mhm. Yeah, and again, it's the kind of book that once you get to the end and then you go, wait, what? And then you start
Yeah.
over again.
Read
Oh,
it.
okay.
Read it again, yeah.
Now I can see this is shadowing that. Now I see why this.
Yeah.
It's very, very beautiful tapestry. Really
Uh-huh.
complex.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But I feel like it's such a wise book and such a graciously
Yes.
compassionate book,
Yes.
despite a lot of brutal-ish pieces. And they're real. And we look at that we all know that, right? Read the paper or try not to. But the graciousness of Jiko and actually of Now as she kind of
Mhm.
grows
Yeah.
into her maturity in that way. And Ruth drifting in some ways. Like she heals her mother, cares for her mother through her mother's increasing dementia and death, and then starts wondering if she's got Alzheimer's herself. She can't find purpose. She can't sit down and write. Well, I know how about that one goes. But I think it's partly that's a reflection of our American insistence that you just keep going all the time, and grieving isn't something you do you have a very limited time for it, and then you move on again and do more and be productive. And so to me, that her whole kind of lostness was really poignant in terms of what is time for? What is our life for? What are we going to do with it? Right?
Well, I remember during studying world religions, and I think with my knowledge of the Western religions, I grew up in Utah, so we had the Mormon religion, but the emphasis was on what you could do to save yourself. These are the things you do, and then you'll go to a good place after. And I remember going to the Buddhist religion, and they talked about the golden chain of Buddha and how the focus isn't me. The focus is that what I do helps Barbara, helps John, and helps myself. But and I think that kind of rings true and kind of weaves through the talk of Buddhism. I thought that was an interesting concept.
I think we have time for just another thought or two, or another shared idea. If anyone has something, Sheila did. Oh, Barbara.
I have one thing. She's talking about when her dad would walk her to school and they talk about stuff, and she didn't remember what they talked about. It didn't matter. And then she says, the important thing was that we were being polite and not saying all the things that were making us unhappy, which is the only way we knew how to love each other. And I just thought, well, that was so very much in such a few words,
Yes.
That's one sentence to describe unhappy family dynamics all over the world.
Yes. Yes. Right.
But she still appreciates the connection and the effort.
Yes. Yeah.
Sort of on a light note, I just want to reflect on all of you folks, on several of you folks anyway, 4 of you, having blue, wearing blue today, and different shades thereof. Amazing. I think you did a great job of doing that. Good picture.
Thank you.
You didn't get the memo? You didn't get the memo?
Pauline, isn't it?
So we're gonna meet 3 more times, and so share this video and let other people know. We'll meet in person and on Zoom, the 22nd of July, August 5th and August 19th, all Mondays, and we'll work our way through the sections and try not to spoil it too much for each other. But it's been comforting for me, and it sounds like for Anita, to know that there are some threads that we are going to see more of. So thank you all. Thank you, Anne, for organizing this. And I'm grateful for the city for inspiring us to try to read something together.
It's a great program. Thanks everybody for your participation. See you next time.